morning, everyone. A question I get very often is, Rabbi, how do you make your videos? Do you have someone walking with you holding your camera? And the answer is no. I just stretch out my hand and hold the camera in front of myself as I walk. Why do I mention this? Because this week's Torah portion talks about a woman stretching out her hand. And that one act of stretching out her hand changed the history, not just for the Jewish people, but for the entire world. It's the remarkable story of the daughter of Pharaoh, who comes to the Nile, sees a baby crying in a basket, stretches out her hand, and rescues the baby. And little did she know that that one act of kindness would not only save a beautiful baby, but that baby would rise up to rescue, redeem the entire Jewish nation from slavery, and be the one to bring the Torah down from heaven for the Jewish people, lead the Jewish people to the land of Israel, and all of Jewish history and world history as a result would unfold from that one act. And what's so remarkable is that this woman, Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh, was the daughter of the person who issued the edict that all Jewish baby boys have to be drowned. It's the equivalent of Hitler's daughter rescuing Jews and hiding them during the Holocaust. That's incredible. It's showing us that every person has free will and can choose to do right over wrong regardless. As Einstein once said, what is right isn't always popular, and what's popular isn't always right. But when it talks about Batya rescuing the baby, it says she stretched forth amata. Now, amata doesn't usually mean a hand, because the Hebrew word for hand is yad, or for a woman yada. It should have said she stretched forth her yada, her hand. Why does it say amata? And Rashi gives numerous answers to this question. But one of the answers Rashi says is that the word amma in Hebrew also means a cubit, foot. It's a measurement. It's actually about 18 inches. And Rashi quotes the Midrash that says something absolutely fascinating, something remarkable, stunning. Rashi says that she stretched out her hand, but her hand couldn't reach the basket that Moses was in. And therefore God elongated her hand, extended her arm, many amot, many cubit feet, in order for her to be able to rescue the baby and reach baby Moses in the basket. Now, this miracle obviously is remarkable, but the lesson that it teaches each and every one of us is amazing. The lesson is that sometimes there are things that seem beyond. There are things in life sometimes that seem beyond our reach, beyond our grasp. And most people will say, well, I can't achieve this, so why bother attempting? Well, we have to learn from the daughter of Pharaoh. When she saw the basket, she could have said, well, it's beyond my reach. I can't reach that basket. But she didn't do that. She said, let me stretch out my arm as far as it can go. And then the rest I'll leave up to God. And God miraculously extended her arm and she was able to rescue the baby. What this teaches every one of us is that we have to do our part to our utmost. And Hashem will help us achieve the rest. When I was a rabbinical student, about 20 years old, I was studying in Melbourne, Australia. We got a call inviting us to help the Jewish community in Wellington, New Zealand. They said, there is a Jews for Jesus fellow, his name was Richard Christensen, and he had befriended the Jewish community, and he was conducting a Passover Seder, and it wasn't obviously a traditional Jewish Seder, but there were a lot of Russian immigrants that had come there, and they were going to his Seder. So they asked us to come and run a proper Jewish Seder in the local synagogue there. My friend and I went there to set up the Seder. But we were having a very hard time getting people to come to our Seder, because we realized very soon that most people felt close to this fellow who had befriended them and was there for them all year round. And two young rabbis coming to town weren't going to exactly attract them away from his Seder. And as much as we tried to explain to people that it's not a proper Seder, it's not focused on Judaism, it's focused on Christianity, they would not be persuaded. And so finally, in desperation, we came up with an idea. We found out that the Seder was conducted in the restaurant owned by one of the Russian immigrants to Wellington, New Zealand. He had opened up a restaurant, and he would let them use his restaurant for the Seder. So my friend and I drove out to this restaurant to talk to the owner, to try to persuade him to maybe not host the Seder. And when we got there, he looks at us, he sees two rabbinic students, and he says, could you please leave my restaurant now? We said, why? He said, because if my customers see you here looking so religious, I'm going to lose business. Well, we tried every which way to talk to him. He wouldn't be persuaded. He said, I'm going to go call my grandson to kick you out of the store. And he went to the back of the restaurant, and out came a tall grandson. When he came out, he looked at me and he said, Moshe, Scheiner. I said, yeah. He says, how you doing? I said, who are you? I didn't recognize him. The story was that this grandson and his parents had immigrated from Russia. This was when we were kids in their 80s, and had come to Ocean Parkway, and his parents put them in the same yeshiva I was in. And his grandparents immigrated to New Zealand, and they started this restaurant. It became successful, and so they moved to New Zealand to help the family restaurant in New Zealand, the business. And we were in the same yeshiva as kids, and apparently played ball in the yard together, and he remembered me. And even though the grandfather called his grandson to throw us out of the restaurant, suddenly he became friends with us. He started talking about his rabbis back in yeshiva and embraced us and sat down with the grandfather and explained to the grandfather why indeed, based on what he learned in yeshiva as a kid, this is not the type of event they should be hosting in the restaurant. And sure enough, our Seder became very successful and continued from year to year. And that is the lesson of stretching out your hand. Sometimes you don't know, how is this going to work out? How will I ever achieve this? All the odds are against me. Like when the grandfather went to the back of the store to call his grandson to throw us out, we thought there was zero chance we would succeed. But God says, you do your best, and I'll do the rest. Shabbat Shalom.